The state took me away from my dad, and I called him. I'm like, Dad, I need to come home. I'm in trouble in Alaska. Can you send me a plane ticket? And this is in the 70s, so I had a fake ID. I just told him what my fake name was. He sent me an e-ticket and went to the counter, picked up my ticket, got on a plane, came off the plane. And now, mind you, if you can picture this, I'm so like 15 years old, bright red nails, bright red lipstick, a cat suit, like a skin-tight cat suit, and a white fur jacket. Like, he must have looked at me and said, is that my daughter? And I can imagine like what he was thinking. I know what he was thinking. And I just stood up to him and I was like, you created this. You did this to me. My name is Tammy Bitanga, and I was born in Hawaii on the island of Oahu, and my family resided in Waikiki. I didn't really know growing up that my biological dad wasn't my biological dad. I always was told that my mom abandoned me, that my mom left, and then thinking that he was my real dad. You know, I just believed everything that he said. I also believed when he told me to keep a secret, that I was chosen by him, that it was our secret, that there was a lot of sexual abuse going on. I found out that he had hanai'd me when I was 13. From 1 year old to like 3 years old, I was living with my uncle. I also lived with a sister in between of that. And when I was 6, my hanai dad married a Japanese national. And so I had a stepmom finally. When I was 6, my hanai dad married a Japanese national. And so I had a stepmom finally. I was always trying to please my mom. So I finally got a mom when I was 6. And she's from Japan. And she's beautiful, she's amazing, she's together, she's smart. And I was 6. I didn't know this was gonna happen. And all I wanted to do was just make her happy and please her and make sure that I was the best kid. But I wasn't. I wasn't the best kid, and I had a lot of insecurities, I guess, is what it was, and I was just always trying to make her happy. And I don't think I could make her happy, but like the expectation of how it was to live in our house, and then with my dad was always always touching me, and there was just there was a lot of jealousy going on in our house. It was just really, really difficult trying to please my dad, trying to please my mom, trying to stay out of trouble, trying to go to school. And I learned how to wear a mask. And I learned how to just smile and pretend that everything was good. And I did that. I did it so well that nobody ever knew, like, the hell that I was living at home. And there were bruises, and there was things that people should have been able to see. Like, I was never allowed to sleep out at my friend's house. There were just things that normal kids did that I didn't get to do. Like, I couldn't join hula. My dad did that so that he would always just have control over me and know where I was. When I was 15 years old, a girl came into our foster home, and she talked about how she was working on the streets and how she was making money and how she was working for this pimp. And I was listening to that, and it was like very glorifying. And being in foster care and being away from my family and my trauma from the sexual abuse at home was never talked about or addressed. I did not go to therapy, nothing. And so my behavior, what I would do is I would use my body to get whatever I wanted. This one night, it was actually in the day that we all went to Waikiki and we partied in Waikiki. And these guys rolled up on mopeds and we were partying with them. We were drinking, we were smoking. I ended up going home with one of them, simply his house on Alawai, and partying, he had coke at his house, so we did coke. I had already been doing coke with my friends, so it was nothing new. Like, I knew how to blow coke already at 15. And I didn't go home that night. My foster sisters, they all went home, but I didn't go home. I stayed with that guy. And in the 70s, they didn't call it sex trafficking. He ended up asking me if I wanted to go work the streets for him. And so I was down with it, man. I came from a family, like, my dad was pretty wealthy. Like, he owned a hotel in Waikiki when I was born. And we always had good cars and, like, everything. And then when I went into foster care, things were, like, kind of tough, you know? Like, I didn't have everything I wanted, or even the things that I actually needed sometimes. And so this whole glamorous lifestyle of pimping and hoeing was just very appealing to me. And I was like, I'm giving it away for free. I get to choose who I have a date with. And so I got turned out in Waikiki when I was 15 years old. And it was an older girl that showed me how to walk the strip, how to catch a date, how to turn a trick. And I came back with the money, and I ended up having a lot of money in a very short period of time. And then he offered me to go to Alaska. There was nobody looking for me at that time. Like, I was a runaway. They were looking for a runaway. And so for me to go to Alaska and work out of an escort service and get a fake ID and show, like, I'm an adult, it was really easy for that trafficker. So we call him a trafficker. When I was with him, I called him a pimp. And it was really easy for him to catch me. It was really easy for him to convince me to go sell my body. It was super easy for him to do that. And I say that because my self-worth and who I thought I was and the way that I looked at myself, it was already damaged by my dad. Like, I was already broken. Like, that pimp didn't have to break me. I was already broken. I was so homesick. But we had a payphone, and I would call home and I would call my girlfriends and I'd be like, oh my gosh, you wouldn't even believe what I'm doing. Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe how much coke is up here. You wouldn't believe. And I just would tell them all the things. And, you know, my girlfriends, they were like 15-year-old girls from Hawaii, and they didn't, like, it wasn't even a thing, right? They didn't have like even a check. They're like, oh my gosh, you're crazy. What are you doing? And, you know, they would like, you better come home already. You're gonna, you know, something's gonna happen to you. Something bad's gonna happen to you. I got in a car with some guys, and you're not supposed to get in cars. And I ended up having a gun pulled to my head and them taking whatever little money they gave me. So basically I got robbed. And then having to come back and tell him that I got robbed. So that was hard. That was a hard thing to do. And then for him to tell me, like, I'm too young to be on the stroll, like, I'm too young to be on the strip. So go back to the massage parlor, the escort service, like, go back and work inside. So basically, that's why I left him. I got all my things, I went to the massage parlor, and then I called a friend who was another pimp, and I just was like, take me to the airport. After I called my dad. Came off the plane, and now mind you, if you can picture this, I'm so like 15 years old, bright red nails, bright red lipstick, a cat suit, like a skin tight cat suit, and a white fur jacket. Like, he must have looked at me and said, is that my daughter? And I can imagine like what he was thinking. I know what he was thinking. And I just stood up to him and I was like, you created this. You did this to me. And we had some conversations over time. But I kept going into Waikiki. I kept working myself with no pimp. I did that for like a month because I was a cocaine addict. I had learned how to freebase cocaine with the trafficker. And so then I was a cocaine addict by the time I came back. And so I needed to support myself. And so I would go pull a couple tricks. They call it renegade. And then I would like try to go work in the office with my dad during the day. And then one day he pissed me off about something and I left again. And I actually had found my real bio dad. And so I went and hid out at my bio dad's house for a couple months. And that's how I ended up going back into foster care. When I was 15, I went back to high school. I graduated when I was 18. I had a baby when I was 18. And I was in a very horribly violent relationship with my baby daddy. And when my son was 2, I said, forget this, I'm not gonna stay with him. And I went back out and I started turning tricks again in Waikiki and rented a hotel room, had a boyfriend who was a drug dealer. And I just did that for a few months until I ended up getting robbed and raped on the Alawai. And there were some other things that happened that I decided I was gonna go back to my son's dad, which was the most horrible mistake because the abuse didn't stop. I stayed with him until my son was like 4. And then I just tried to be normal. I just tried to be normal. I got a normal job. I was a receptionist at a law firm. And so I was straight, working in the law office during the day and then working in the strip club at night and pulling tricks. Until one day, one of my girlfriends was like, Tammy, you have to stop. You're gonna die. Because I had this really bad trick that kept coming back and it was a bad deal. And I would complain about it all the time. And she was just like, you're gonna die, or you're gonna kill somebody. Like, somebody's gonna kill you. Like, what you're doing is bad. And I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, this is the way that I've been all these years. She's like, you should come to church with me. I was like, what? Happy people? For real? No. In fact, I'm hungover and I'm not gonna go to church with you. And so she kept like asking me and inviting me until one day I did go to church with her. And yeah, the happy people were there. And I was just like, gosh, they have no idea like what life is really about. They're like in this little church bubble. And I kept going though. I kept going with her because I knew my life was just horrible and spiraling, and I was so broken and so disgusted with myself. By that time I was a full-on alcohol, like every week alcohol, every day pot, every day cigarettes. I had managed to like give up cocaine by that time. But it was like, I just kept going to church, and like I would go to church and the pastor would talk about stuff. And I'd be like, whoa, who told him my life? Who told him my story? I just felt like something different about those happy people. And I started going to Bible studies, and then the pastor invited me to like be on a team, like a team to serve. And then I really couldn't I really couldn't keep going with him because I was like, man, if this guy really knew my story, if this guy really knew about me, he wouldn't let me serve in his church. So I wrote him this letter, like, oh my gosh, it is like 10 pages. And I just really poured it all out, like what we just talked about, basically, like my childhood and the abuse and working. And I mean, I had no other words, but I was a prostitute. I didn't have words for that. The word was prostitute. And I remember just like pouring myself out to him. And then him going like, Anne? Like, it didn't even faze him. Like, so that's Pastor Guy. And he was just like not fazed by it. You know, like he didn't even faze nothing. He was just like, yeah, you're on our team, man. You're going to serve with us. I was like, okay, shoot, Stan, I'm going to keep serving in this church. So slowly, like maybe 5 years in, I completely turned my life around. Like I was sober. I had given up weed and alcohol and cigarettes, and I was walking in purity. I had no boyfriends for a while. It was just like that identity shift, like going to Bible studies, like learning who I really was, like who did God say I was? Like when I read about Rahab in the Bible, when I read about Bathsheba, when I read about like a lot of the women in the Bible had a lot of similarities in their life. When I read about Tamar, like I was relating to these women in the Bible, like, you know, Jesus' lineage, there was a prostitute in Jesus' lineage. And so I just knew and I accepted that I was not created to be abused anymore. I like believed it finally, like my identity shifted. So I'd been in the church about 10 years at that point. Like I said, I was never gonna get married, but I ended up getting married. So I was in the church for probably like 8 years, and then I knew this guy. I mean, we were friends in intermediate school, and we had been friends as adults, and we started dating, and we got married, and it was pretty crazy. Like I just never thought I was gonna ever get married, but I did. And then like 2 years into our marriage, I heard about sex trafficking, and it was because I went to a conference. I went to this women's conference called Arise, and these girls were talking about sex trafficking, and I was like, what the heck is sex trafficking? And so I sat through their breakout session, and I was like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. And then I didn't do anything. And then the next year, I went back to that conference, and they were still talking about sex trafficking. And this time I told my women's team that I was serving in the church, hey, let's do a fundraiser for them. Let's help them get the message out. Let's work with them. Let's adopt it as our community service for the year. And that was in 2011. And so that's when I met Jessica Munos. And I was like, who is this girl bringing this to Hawaii, and why are we talking about it? And then, you know, I started talking to her, and then she was like, come with us to training. We're going to go to California. Come with us. So me and my two of my ladies from my church, we went along with them for this training. So we're in California, and this survivor spoke. And I listened to her speak, and I was like, it just shifted like who I was and who I had thought I was all this time. And like, mind you, when I was in church, I had an identity. I was a daughter of the King, right? So I knew like I was not going to take abuse any longer. But when I heard this survivor talk, and she described her victimization, and she described like the way that her trafficker had enticed her into being in that game, it was a whole different thing. Like I was like, wait a minute. All these years, I thought I made a bad choice. I thought I was at fault. I thought I did it to myself. And like hearing the survivor talk about it kind of just made this whole light bulb moment for me. So we're going in the van after that conference part, and I'm in the back of the van and I'm telling Jessica and the rest of the team, I'm like, hey guys, this happened to me. And they're like, what? Because I had not talked to them or told them what happened to me when I was 15 or the things that I'd been through in my adult life. And they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, yeah, this happened to me, you guys. I was 15 years old and I worked out of Waikiki. And so that's how it started for me, was like, if I thought to myself all those years, I was 40 something by that time, that it was my fault, what about all of our kids today in our juvenile justice system that are walking around in our homeless camps, that are just lost out there? What do they think of themselves? I need to help. I really need to help. And so I told Jessica, hey, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna help the team. I'm gonna do whatever it is that you guys need. I realized after serving with her and helping her team and stuff that I was a volunteer, yeah. So I realized a little bit later, like I needed more healing. Like when I had to like reckon with the victimization, that I needed healing. Like I needed to work on that part of my life. Because I would say things like, oh, my pimp, he was so nice to me. He was so good to me. Like he never did anything bad to me. And let that resonate for a minute, because my life was in danger every single time I turned a trick. But even up until, being out of it, I was out of the game for like 15 years already at that point. I still would say things like that, And even recently, I was in a it's a healing group called In the Game, and they were talking about like, okay, what's a degrading statement that you have heard in your past? And I'm like, there's no degrading statements. Nobody talks degrading to me. And then when I heard how pimps and traffickers talk to girls, I'm like, oh, I've been talked to like that before. I suppose that's degrading. I get to wear many different hats with Ho'olanapua, and part of the team that I'm on is advocacy, and we get to get in there and actually empower and help and motivate our children to like be their own voice. And that's really what motivates me, is that I want them to be strong. I want them to be warriors. I don't want them to have to wait 20 years to figure it out, that it wasn't their fault. When a trafficker starts to traffic them when they're 8 years old, and sometimes we might not get a hold of them until they're maybe 13. Like 4 years is too long. It's a moment in time, and it's not going to dictate the rest of your life. You can do the work to heal. You can get resources that can help you move forward, and we definitely want to help you and push forward through your healing process. It is our kuleana. It is our responsibility. It is the home. Like, pay attention. Pay attention to what your children are looking at on the internet. Pay attention to who they're talking to on their Instagrams and their Facebooks and their Twitter and all the other ways that that social media is being used today. Also, pay attention to like who are they in contact with, and also like teach them what is healthy relationships, and teach them what is safe adults, and teach them like how to have a conversation, how to say when something's uncomfortable, how to say no, how to say yes. I think communicating with our children today is so important.